I've been carrying a boot knife pretty much every day for 2 years, and I had to do a bunch of research and product testing to find one that I really liked and was actually going to work. And that's because the boot knife world is littered with misinformation and honestly just a lot of bad product. I've spent a bunch of money and personal sanity to bring you guys the best boot knives. This is the aptly named Kershaw Secret Agent. And I think the name's perfect because it captures what infatuated some of us about boot knives when we were kids. But the Secret Agent also captures the 3 main qualities when you're looking for an actually good boot knife. And those 3 qualities are the way the knife retains in the sheath, the way the sheath retains on your boot, and then of course, the way the sheath and knife fit on your boot and the way that it interacts with your ankle and your leg, because you're walking around this boot knife on your leg all day long, very easy to get a hot spot. How a boot knife retains inside of the sheath is very critical because this is a fixed blade knife that you have floating around down at your foot that you don't have a ton of control over on a regular basis. So you don't want the knife slipping in and out, but you do want to easily be able to draw the knife and put the knife away if you're going to go ahead and use it. And that's something that the Kershaw Secret Agent does really well. It's got great retention, no clasps or buttons in the road, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. We do have a knife that retains that way that I think you guys will like. The other great thing about the Secret Agent is that it has an ambi sheath, and that's really nice when you're talking about being able to put the knife away easily in a hurry or whatever situation you might be using your knife in. The second thing that we're going to consider when we're talking about a boot knife is the way that the knife retains to your boot. Now, this is really important because you don't want the knife moving around on you a ton. You don't want the clip breaking or bending on you very easily. And the really big thing is you don't want the knife sheath eating into your boot. So for example, with the Secret Agent, it has a nice round, really tough metal clip. So that's gonna slip right over the lip of your boot and right off at night when you take it out of your boot or if you don't wanna carry your knife on any given day. You might be tempted if you have fixed blades at home to try to utilize them as boot knives. You might have a knife that retains really well and you're like, okay, cool, I just need to put like an ulti clip or something on it to make it fit in my boot. One of the big issues with ulti clips is they're great for universal carry for fixed blades in a lot of different situations, but they grab on really, really tough. So when you clip that ulti clip to the side of your boot, that is going to move around just a little bit on your boot, and as it moves around, it is going to eat into your boot. And finally, you want to consider how the knife and sheath are going to interact with your boot and your body. And this is actually a big deal because this knife is on your person and it's just touching your skin like all day long. If the knife is rubbing on your calf in a weird way, rubbing on your ankle in a weird way, you're going to develop a hot spot. It's going to give you a blister. It's going to put a sore on your leg. It's just not going to be comfortable to carry. And you want it to really just kind of disappear and be there when you need it, but not in the road when you don't need it. The Kershaw Secret Agent does that really well with its slim profile, so it can fit right between your ankle and your Achilles heel and not rub a ton on your calf. And that's obviously for me personally. So with all of these knives, you're gonna have to figure out the best way for you to carry it. Now, the Kershaw Secret Agent is 8.7 inches overall with a 4.4 inch blade. It's got a bayonet blade and it is 8CR 13 MOV. It's got a GFN handle and then just a nice polymer sheath. Now, the Kershaw Secret Agent does a lot of things right, but for me personally, it does sit a little too high, a little too proud on the boot and rubs on my calf. I actually took this thing and went on like a 2.5 hour walk. It was like 7 or 8 miles and no hot spots, no problems, but it was just a little bit annoying. So for me personally, the Kershaw Secret Agent isn't one I would carry all the time, but this is a great boot knife in the boot knife category. Next up, we have the CIVIVI Circulus. Now, like I mentioned, 2 years ago, I did a bunch of research and product testing on boot knives. So when I jumped back into it recently, I was kind of bummed to find that 2 of the knives I really liked were discontinued and not available anywhere. And there weren't any really new great entries barring the Circulus. The Circulus is interesting because it's not billed as a boot knife. And like I was saying earlier, most of the time that means that it's just not gonna work in your boot. But also a lot of boot knives that are billed as boot knives also are not gonna work in your boot. And we'll touch on that in just a little bit. The cool thing about the Circulus is that it's a really compact knife with a really nice clip and versatile sheath. So it starts to check off those 3 fundamental things that we're looking for with blade retention, sheath retention, and then comfort in boot. Now, like I mentioned, the Circulus is compact, comes in under 5 inches at 4.96 inches. The blade comes in at 1.96 inches, and it's a 10 CR construction, obviously skeletonized. Then it's got a really simple Kydex sheath with a really nice clip on it that works perfectly for going on your boot and not tearing it up. When we're considering the knife going in and out of the sheath, admittedly, when I first got the Circulus, it was really hard to get in and out of the sheath and was not going to be viable for a boot knife. Honestly, it wasn't even really viable for a good EDC knife. But after taking it in and out a couple of times, I found that the sheath loosened up really good. And to be honest, it was probably because I had the clip on too tight. And finally, the Circulus is very comfortable in boot. And it kind of breaks the mold when it comes to fixed blade knives, because most of the time you cannot translate a normal fixed blade knife into a boot knife. But because of the compact size, because of the compact sheath, and because of the clip placement, the Circulus goes in your boot and you basically forget it's there. It retains really well and it doesn't rub or walk around or move weird or anything like that. Another really cool thing about the Circulus is because it's so lightweight, you could use this in a tennis shoe as well. So if you wear like a high top Converse, which I do sometimes, or a high top Van, or any sort of high top shoe that's not like a hardcore boot, the Circulus is the only knife in all the knives that we found that would work to do double duty in that way as well. So kind of a neat little aside about it. The other singular thing about the Circulus in our lineup is that this is the only knife designed in a more utilitarian style. You'll notice with every other boot knife that we're looking at, they're either dagger or bayonet based. And the assumption there is that they're designed for self-defense. And chances are that's probably where their heritage comes from. But I've had the opportunity over the years to talk to a lot of knife defense experts, police officers, guys who have been deployed, and really at the end of the day, a boot knife might be useful in a very last-ditch effort, but it's in a very inconvenient place to get to if you're considering it for self-defense. I definitely believe that you should be able to defend yourself, but I don't think that a boot knife is the way to go. And the reason that I carry a boot knife every day is to have a fixed blade on me that's kind of out of the road, not on my hip. I don't have to really think about it, but I have it if I need a fixed blade. The Circulus is pretty cool in that it's a more of an EDC style boot knife, because it's just supposed to be an EDC fixed blade, and not really designed for self-defense. This is the Smith & Wesson SWF 606. You gotta love the naming convention, but it's a pretty dang good boot knife. It's 8 3/4 inches overall, 4.5 inch dagger blade. The blade is 8CR13 MOV. You got G10 handles, and then honestly, a really nice leather sheath. The Smith & Wesson comes in at right around 5.9 ounces, and that is for sure the upper limit of what you would want in a boot knife. Admittedly, the Smith & Wesson is just a little top heavy with these G10 handles, but the cool thing is you can take those handles off, they're completely removable, and you could have a skeletonized dagger blade knife in your boot. And the reason that I think that that's interesting is because one thing that I use my personal boot knife for a lot is just like throwing in trees and stuff when I'm camping or when I'm bored or when we're shooting something like this and I'm just killing time. So it could turn into a pretty good throwing boot knife if you were to move that top end heaviness. The Smith & Wesson sits pretty tall when it's in your boot. It'd be really good for like a cowboy boot knife carry, something that you have a boot cut jean or a wider bottom jean on, and probably a taller boot, because it does sit so high. Otherwise, you're gonna find that it's a little bit tough to get in and out of your boot when you're wanting to grab it and use it for whatever you're gonna use it for. And you will find that because it is a little top heavy, it will have a tendency to walk back and forth just a little bit when you're walking. So depending on your calf size, this may not be the boot knife for you. But again, overall, pretty dang good. Retention in the sheath is pretty nice, and the sheath has a snap on it so that you can lock the knife in fully secure, which is kind of a nice option. Personally, I don't want to have to fiddle with that every time I go for the knife, so you could easily walk around with this by either cutting that button off or just not buttoning it every time you put the knife in and out. As far as retention on your boot, really great metal clip that grabs the boot really nice, doesn't mark up the boot, doesn't take away any material, and then it has a nice thin profile, so it's going to sit behind that ankle bone in front of the Achilles tendon, right in that sweet spot that you're looking for when you want to carry a boot knife. So the only real consideration with this is it's a little bit taller, it's a little bit top heavy, and it may have a tendency to rub on your calf depending on how big your calves are. But overall, the SWF 606 is a pretty sweet boot knife. And finally, we have the Mona Lisa of boot knives, the piece de la résistance when it comes to boot knives, and that is the Cold Steel Counterattack 2. I absolutely love this knife. This is the knife that has been in my boot for the last 2 years, so, you know, it's used, abused, it's been loved. Overall length on the Cold Steel Counterattack 2 is 6 3/4 inches. It's got a 3.3 inch blade. It's only an Oz 8 blade, not a great blade steel admittedly. Really, none of these knives have great blade steels. It's just kind of the nature of boot knives, but really easy to sharpen in the field, which is nice. And you can get it super razor sharp, which is kind of cool to have a really sharp knife on you. It has a nice rubberized grippy handle. It's held up really, really well. And then it's got a great Circulus sheath that again has just held up amazingly with 2 years of use. And like I said, almost every day. I mean, I wear boots most of the time, and if I have my boots on, I've got my Counterattack 2 in my boots. Now, when we're looking at our 3 qualifications, I derived those from all the research that I've done, all the knives that I've carried, and from my awesome experience with the Cold Steel. And I should be clear, nobody's paying me to say any of this. I really just personally love this knife because it has proven itself to be a valuable and reliable companion for a long time. It fits into the Circulus sheath great. It's very similar to the Secret Agent from Kershaw in that the sheath is all the retention that you need, comes in and out nice and easy. It is not ambidextrous, which is one point that the Secret Agent has over the Cold Steel. Now, one point that the Cold Steel has over the Secret Agent is that this is a lot more compact. So it's easier to get at with a tall or short boot. It works both ways. And you can get at it with a tighter fitting cuffed pant or a looser fitting cuffed pant. It's a little more universal in its applications. Now, when we're looking at retention of the sheath, the Cold Steel Counterattack 2 sheath is amazing. Again, this one has been used for 2 years. Still holds onto the boot perfectly, never slips out, never falls out, never had a problem with it. The clip still holds great, no bending, no breaking, no nothing in that Circulus sheath, and it doesn't create any marks on my boot. It's not taking materials off of my boot. Because if you have a nice pair of boots, the last thing that you want is an inexpensive knife ruining your boot. That's something that's really cool about all of the knives in this list. All of them are super, super affordable. And I really think that the Cold Steel Counterattack 2 is just stellar. Whether you're looking for a good EDC backup just to have on you regularly, whether you want to feel like your favorite spy from a movie or action hero from a movie when you were a kid, or you just want to have something reliable that you know is there whenever you might need it, boot knives are a great option. I think it's one that we overlook regularly. So I hope that you guys found this useful. I hope you get yourself a boot knife. Let me know down in the comments. We'll catch you on the next one.